Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My parents invited me to dinner, saying they just had a few things to discuss about the future of the family business. I walked in expecting small talk over mashed potatoes. Instead, they slid a stack of legal documents across the table like it was a monopoly deal. My father cleared his throat. "Your brother will be managing your office branch from now on," he said, tapping the papers confidently. "He'll receive 25% of your profits for his supervision." My mother added gently, "It's just practical." "He's family." I didn't react. Not a blink. Not a breath. Not a protest. I just smiled. Because here's something my family has never understood. Some of us don't raise our voices. We raise the stakes. Calmly, I reached into my briefcase. Their conversation faded into background noise as I pulled out my own folder. I placed one single page on top of their documents. Clause 4.3. Dad frowned, scanning it once, twice. And suddenly, his face drained of color. Clause 4.3. In the event of proposed managerial redistribution or profit allocation without prior written consent of the founding authority, me, all assets and operational control revert solely to the founding authority, nullifying any external claims. Translation? You don't take 25% of my business. You lose 100% of your access to it. My brother leaned forward. You wrote that?" I looked at him and said, "I didn't build my success so people could assign themselves ownership of it." Silence, the kind that weighs more than words. My father slowly pushed the papers back toward himself. "I suppose. We spoke too soon." I smiled again, wider this time. "No, you didn't. I just answered in a language you finally understand. Paperwork." My parents invited me to dinner like it was any other evening. Calm voices, warm smiles, a table set a little too perfectly. I should have known something was off the moment I walked in. My brother was already seated, legs crossed like he'd been waiting for a promotion ceremony. We barely got through the first bite when my dad cleared his throat and slid a thick stack of papers across the table toward me. No warning, no discussion, just a legal ambush served with roasted chicken. He spoke with that firm, rehearsed tone, the kind parents use when they've already decided what's best for you. "These," he said, tapping the papers, "are updated business management agreements. From now on, your brother will be managing your office branch and will receive 25% of your profits for overseeing operations." And then, the audacity, my mother smiled softly like she had just gifted me a blanket. "It's only fair," she added. "You're always so busy. He'll help take the load off." My brother didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His smirk said everything. He wasn't offering to help. He was expecting a crown. I looked down at the papers, not a single request for my approval. Just signatures already planned, spaces marked where mine should go. They didn't ask. They told I didn't react. I didn't argue. I didn't even blink. Instead, I smiled, slowly, calmly. The kind of smile that made them shift in their seats, because it wasn't agreement. It was warning. Without saying a word, I reached down, unlatched my briefcase, and pulled out my own folder. I laid it carefully beside their stack and slid one page forward. Clause 4.3. My father frowned and picked it up. He started reading casually, then stopped. His eyes scanned again, slower. His posture changed. My mother leaned forward. My brother's smirk evaporated. Clause 4.3. The clause I had written into every business contract I signed when I built that company from scratch. It stated clearly that any attempt to alter ownership, management, or profit distribution without my prior written consent would automatically revoke all shared access, managerial involvement, and financial participation from all external parties. In short, they hadn't just come to take 25%. They had just forfeited 100%. Nobody spoke. My dad finally looked up at me, voice softer now. "You put this in?" I simply took a sip of water. "I put it in," I said, "because I knew one day you might forget I didn't inherit my position. I built it." My brother opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but all he could force out was, "You can't seriously—" "I can," I cut in. "And I already have." No shouting. No speeches. Just silence thick enough to press into their lungs. They came to assign me a role. They left realizing I had already written the rules. My father slowly set the clause down like it was a live wire. His fingers lingered on it, as if contact alone might change the meaning. My mother looked between us in disbelief, as if she had just watched a magic trick where she couldn't decide whether to applaud or be afraid. My brother leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with forced casualness, masking the fact that his confidence had just cracked. "So what?" he tried to scoff. "You're threatening your own family with legal clauses?" I didn't even turn to look at him. "No," I said calmly. "I'm reminding my family that business doesn't run on assumptions. It runs on contracts." My mother reached forward, appealing now instead of asserting. "We were only thinking of what's best for everyone." "And I already did," I replied, tapping my folder lightly. "That's why Clause 4.3 exists." Silence stretched again, heavier this time. My father cleared his throat, trying to regain some authority. "Let's be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "I just came prepared." I could see the shift happen in real time. The power dynamic flipped, not with shouting, not with confrontation, but with documentation. They had expected me to react emotionally. Instead, I responded structurally. My brother leaned forward, tone sharper now. "You really wouldn't let me be part of it?" "You could have been," I said without hesitation. "All you had to do was ask to earn a role, not steal one through signatures I wasn't even present for." His jaw tensed. "You think I can't handle it?" I shook my head slowly. "I think if you could, you would have come to me with a proposal, not with paperwork arranged behind my back." He fell silent. My father finally exhaled, defeated. "So what happens now?" I stood up and carefully packed Clause 4.3 back into my briefcase. "Now," I said with a polite smile, "now we finish dinner. And when we're done, I'm taking all the documents you brought and shredding them, since they're legally irrelevant." No one argued. Not because I was louder, but because I was already done playing the game they thought they set up. My brother looked at me differently, not as someone he could bypass, but as someone he'd have to negotiate with. Respect isn't always spoken. Sometimes it's stamped, signed, and laminated. I sat back down, the room now utterly different even though no one had moved. The food on the table was still steaming, the glasses still full, but the atmosphere had shifted from casual dinner to boardroom reckoning. Nobody dared pick up a fork. My mother finally spoke, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "We didn't think you'd take it this way." I let out a quiet breath, steady and controlled. "That's the point," I replied. "You didn't think. You assumed." Their silence confirmed everything. They hadn't underestimated my intelligence. They had underestimated my memory. They forgot who built the company. They forgot who signed every loan, stayed up every night drafting strategies, pitched every client, handled every crisis. They forgot that every inch of growth was carved out by me. My father finally reached for his drink, hand still slightly unsteady. "You know," he muttered, staring into the glass, "in our time, children didn't defend themselves from parents like this." I looked at him, unwavering. "In your time," I said, "respect was expected. In mine, it's earned. Even by parents," he froze again. Not from anger, but realization. He had raised me to be strong. He just never considered I might one day need to be strong against him. My brother exhaled sharply through his nose. Not quite anger, not quite defeat, more like reluctant admiration cloaked in annoyance. "So what? You want me to start from scratch like you did?" I gave a small shrug. "Or start with me, but not over me." His eyes searched mine for something. Permission, forgiveness, maybe partnership. For the first time that night, he didn't look entitled. He looked like someone who finally understood the value of asking before taking. I reached for my glass of water and lifted it slightly. "To clarity," I said. My father blinked, then slowly mirrored the gesture. My mother followed. My brother hesitated, then raised his glass too, smaller but present. I didn't toast to peace, or to family. I toasted to something far more important. Boundaries, the invisible walls that turn respect from an expectation into a requirement. We all took a sip, and for the first time that evening, no one spoke. Not out of shock, not out of offense, but because there was finally nothing left to argue. The message had landed, clean, precise, undeniable. My brother set his glass down first. He kept his eyes on the table, fingers tapping in thought, then finally looked up at me. Not as a rival, not as someone trying to claim what wasn't his, but as a man realizing the difference between inheritance and initiative. So, he said cautiously, if I wanted to be part of it, really be part of it, what would that even look like? There it was, the first genuine question of the night. Not a demand, not a declaration, a request. I leaned back, studying him. You come to me with a plan, I said. Not entitlement, numbers, strategy, something you built, not something you expect handed over. He nodded slowly, absorbing every word like a blueprint. My father cleared his throat. And us? He asked quietly. Where do we stand? I met his eyes, steady and unwavering. As my parents, always welcome. As business decision-makers, only when invited. It wasn't disrespect, it was definition. He didn't argue. Instead, he placed the untouched stack of documents in the center of the table and slid them toward me, not with authority this time, but with surrender. You do what you think is right, he said. We'll follow your lead. Not an apology, but acknowledgement, and sometimes that's more powerful. I gathered the papers calmly, folded them once, and tucked them into my briefcase, not to keep them, but to ensure they never surfaced again. The night resumed like nothing happened. My mother finally reached for the serving spoon. My father asked about my week. My brother even cracked a small joke. But beneath the casual conversation, something new sat between us. They no longer saw me as the child with a successful business. They saw me as the business owner who happened to be their child, and that difference changes everything. As the conversation eased back into safer territory, I watched them carefully. Their words were lighter now, but their posture had changed. My father, who always leaned forward when making decisions, was now leaning back, listening instead of directing. My mother, who often filled every silence with suggestions, now chose her words like she was walking through a museum of fragile glass. And my brother. He was no longer lounging like a king in waiting. His shoulders were squared, attentive, not defeated, but recalibrated. I didn't rush to fill the space with comfort. Growth isn't supposed to be cushioned. Sometimes the silence between people is where respect learns how to breathe. At one point, my mother gently reached across the table and touched my hand. There was no speech, no apology, no dramatics, just quiet acknowledgement. A silent we understand now, and I accepted it, not as a victory, but as a correction, long overdue. We continued dinner without revisiting the subject, but the hierarchy had been rewritten in real time, not by force, not by rebellion, but by clarity. Halfway through the meal, my brother spoke again, this time without ego. You know, I always thought you made it look easy, he said. But tonight I realized you're not lucky, you're deliberate. I set my fork down, meeting his eyes, not to belittle him, but to elevate the truth. Everything looks easy when you're only watching the results, I replied. He nodded once, a simple gesture, but a meaningful one. For the rest of the meal, no one treated me like I was overreacting or being dramatic. No one made excuses. No one minimized what happened. They did something far more valuable. They adapted. By the time dessert arrived, something clicked in my mind. A quiet revelation that settled deeper than any victory. Sometimes you don't need to demand respect. You just need to stop accepting anything less. And like gravity, everything rearranges itself accordingly. By the time I closed my briefcase and stood to leave, I knew something fundamental had shifted, not just in the room, but in our dynamics forever. There were no apologies shouted across the table, no dramatic reconciliations, no hugs drenched in sentiment. Just steady eye contact, quiet understanding, mutual recognition. They had come to announce control. They left acknowledging mine. As I walked toward the door, my father spoke softly, without command, without authority, just sincerity. We'll come to you next time, he said. I paused, hand resting on the doorframe, and nodded once. Good, I replied, because I'll always listen. I just won't be overruled. No bitterness, no resentment, just boundaries. Clear, firm, final. I stepped outside into the cool night air and exhaled, not with relief, but with certainty. It wasn't just a business victory. It was a personal one. Because power isn't about who speaks the loudest. It's about who decides when the conversation ends.